ISIS Unveiled, the search for parabiblical wisdom. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian whistleblower, looking into the H.P. Blavatsky classic. And again, we're looking at ISIS Unveiled, the search for parabiblical wisdom. I'll be back tonight at 10 p.m. This will be the last broadcast before that. I'll be back tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific, with a, that looks kind of funny, with a show, Ask or Challenge the Christian Whistleblower. It'll be live, and I'll invite you to ask or challenge the Christian Whistleblower, and we'll do that live. We'll answer some questions and maybe even look at a couple challenges. I'm asking you to like, share, subscribe, and consider financially sponsoring this work. So let's go ahead and get into the great book of Blavatsky. This is the 3rd version, so there's been a couple more. Excuse me, if you want to go back and look them up. The Veil of Isis, Chapter 1, and this book is totally called ISIS Unveiled, Part 1, Science, Chapter 1. We commenced research where modern conjecture closes its faithless wings. And with us, those were the common elements of science which the sages of today disdain as wild chimeras, or despair as of unfathomable mysteries. Blavatsky says that somewhere in this world there's an old book that even people that know about old books would not know about and would study over for much time, called the Cifra de Zunauta. It is a literary relic. It is the original. And from that book comes what's known today as the ancient Hebrew documents of Kabbalah. Kabbalah, that's not how the Hebrews spell it, but we know what we're talking about. One of the illustrations represents the divine essence emanating from Adam. And of course, with that asterisk, we're not saying that it's really some dude named Adam, but the first person of mankind, or of humankind, let's say. It could have been Eve, but the first human, there's a luminous arc proceeding from that first human, going upward to form a circle, and then, having attained the highest point of its circumference, the ineffable glory bends back again and returns to earth. Let's see if I can't find that. Can I find that picture? I doubt I can, but let's see if we can't find that picture real quickly. I can't even copy it. Okay, forget that. Anyway. And as the glory bends back from its apex up here in the top, as it comes back to Earth, bringing a higher type of humanity in its vortex, and as it approaches nearer and nearer to our planet, the emanation becomes more and more shadowy, and until upon touching the ground, it's black as night. And there's a conviction founded upon 70,000 years of experience, she says, that Hermetic philosophers of all periods have believed that through sin, I don't know if sin's the right word, but that matter has become more gross and dense than it was at man's first formation. And that at the beginning, the human body was of a half ethereal nature, and that before the fall, mankind communed freely with the now unseen universes. And that is completely 100% provable from a biblical standpoint, believe it or not. As I go back, and I'm trying to think where I should go with it to actually show you that, but let's just talk about it. The original creation of man in John 1, or in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, the gods created the heavens and the earth, and there were men there. And even if we drop down to Genesis 1:26, the recreation of man as a hybrid species, even then, man was in essence what did Blavatsky call it? Man was, how did she put it? I think she said a half ethereal being. And that's very much true. We were a being of half ethereal nature. Now, what does that mean to be a being of half ethereal nature. I think I'm going to go ahead and call up my book, Serpents and Doves in the Garden of the Gods. And it talks about that at length. And maybe we'll be able to get a glimpse. Oh, that's the old one. Doggone it. That's what happens when you write, new books, old books, and you improve upon the pain. New Serpents, that's what I'm looking for. Serpents and Doves, part 3, the second edition. And it talks about, we actually get into it in very great depth, what it was like. And I'm just going to try to come down here and find that biblical creation. So let's pop down here. And we're going to get into that. And this is going to show us that we were created as, just like she said, half ethereal beings. We were created as physical beings. We actually were created as spiritual beings. And as spiritual beings, as I flow through this, trying to find the right spot, as spiritual beings, we were, basically spirit, but then we have the ability to go and coalesce into a physical form. So we were born spirit, just like the Elohim, but like the Elohim, we were given the ability to coalesce into physical form. But that took some learning, and how the Lord was able to trick us to go into the mud bodies that he created at Genesis chapter 2 is because we didn't want to wait for our abilities to be developed to the point where we could be manifesting in physical bodies. So let me show you a little bit of that right here. This is from my book, Serpents and Doves. And the Elohim said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. I ask you, are the Elohim spirit beings? Are the Elohim beings that are spirit but can also manifest into physical form? Absolutely. And the Elohim created man in their own image, spiritual, physical, half ethereal, as Blavatsky puts it. In the image of the gods, half ethereal, as Blavatsky puts it, male and female as the gods are. So when the Elohim created man in their image, they created man with a divine spark. They actually created man as a divine spiritual being, a spiritual being with a divine spark. I should have put created man as a spiritual being with a divine spark, and as both male and female. The Elohim were both male and female, and the Elohim were both ethereal and non-ethereal. They were essentially ethereal. We were essentially ethereal. They could go into physical form. We could go into spiritual form. So we were able to do that even at the very beginning of time, as Blavatsky talks about. At our very creation, we were able to do those things. We were able to go and become into and I don't think I was even sharing, was I even sharing that part from my book? But we were able to go as a being, and I think I was sharing it. We were able to go and actually be ethereal, be spirit, or we were able to be human. So that is proven even in Genesis. So you don't have to just believe Blavatsky on that. Very important point for you to understand, very important point for you to be able to get, so you can understand the totality and the reality of who and what you are. And I think that's important. I think you owe it to yourself to understand who and what you are. And I think it's something that you will benefit by doing. So getting back to Blavatsky, she said we were of a half ethereal nature. Genesis echoes that. And that before the fall, before man went into the mud hut bodies, mankind communed freely with the now unseen universes. I believe that. Our man potentially could commune freely. Don't know that we did it, but we were potentially, we had that potentiality within us. And we were able to definitely go between the world that we live in and the world of spirits. The oldest esoteric traditions teach that before the mystic Adam, Many races of human beings lived and died out, each giving place in its turn to another. Well, I don't know about many beings, but we do know from Genesis 1:1 that there were men, a species of mankind on planet Earth before Adam in Genesis 1:1. And then the Lord destroyed them in Genesis 1:2 when the earth became without form and void. So Blavatsky is right in saying that there were other men on planet Earth before Adam and Eve. Whether there were multiple generations, well, I might call that a bit speculative. However, it is important to note that she is pretty much on the right track with saying that there were beings here before Adam. So, were these precedent types more perfect? Did any of them belong to the winged race of men, the winged race of men mentioned by Plato in Phaedrus? Is this a special province of science to solve the problem? The caves of France and the relics of the Stone Age afford a point to which to begin. Now, I actually think that the race of men created before us, before modern man, that race of men was less perfect in this regard. It was less perfect in the fact that it was less perfect to be a form of life to exist and thrive on this planet. The original human species of Genesis 1:1 proved to be not optimal for planet Earth. This is all proved conclusively in Genesis and Serpents and Doves. That's why the next humanoid form made on planet Earth was the upright serpents, the majestic serpents. And they also proved not to be the perfect optimal form for this planet. But as the Christ says in the New Testament, we should be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. So the optimal form for planet Earth had traits of the pure human or the dove and traits of the pure reptile or the majestic serpent. So we as modern man are demonstrably, both scientifically and spiritually, a hybridization of reptile and human. That's beyond debate. So in Blavatsky's terms, the men and women that predated or preceded Adam and Eve were actually inferior in the sense that they were not as well adapted to be an optimal species on planet Earth. Now, they could very well have been superior on another world or another planet, but on this planet, planet Earth, the pure human form was not optimal for life here, nor was the pure reptilian form that was created. It was not optimal for life here. And the Elohim weren't just throwing darts or shooting into the dark. They realized, you know what, we've done our research. We think either the human form or the reptilian form would be best, or maybe a combination of the two. So they tried the human form first. They tried the reptilian form, found out that neither one of them were optimal, combined them, and bam, they've got the optimal life form for life on planet Earth. You can get this Serpents and Doves in the Garden of the Gods for what, $1.99 for the ebook, and I don't know, $15 or so for the paperback. So that gives you a good example and a good idea of what was going on in the beginning, and it gives you a good idea that Blavatsky, she's a pretty smart chick. She's got a lot going on. She has a pretty good understanding of what happened at the time of the beginning, and her point is well taken that as man went into those mud hut bodies, I guess I should show you what I'm talking about with the mud hut bodies, because I say these things and I forget that not everybody that's listening has been with me the whole time. So let's go and let's find out what I'm talking about with the mud hut bodies. And what I mean by the mud hut bodies is that, let me see what's the easiest way for us to do this. What I'm talking about with the mud hut bodies is that the Lord created a false body in order to lure Adam and Eve into it and give up their Elohim status. And I'm going to show you that right here. I want to show you that right here. Mud hut. So mud, stuck in the mud. Here we are, page 65. This is where we'll start. And this is pretty revolutionary stuff. I don't know that it's ever been taught before. And I think that it's going to blow your mind because it's really, really good stuff. Those of you that have been around a while have heard it, but those of you that haven't been around probably have not heard it. And that's not what we want to look at. We want to look at this right here. So what the problem is? What the problem is? Serpents and doves. All right. The Elohumans gave in to the temptation to enter the wood or the tree, which was the mud hut bodies that the Lord had created in Genesis chapter 2. So what they did is they went into those mud hut bodies and they became stuck in that mud. And they were unable to get out. And the Christ talks about this in Mark chapter 8. He says, and he took the blind man, led him out of town, spit on his eyes, healed him, asked him what he saw. And he said, I see men as trees walking. After that, he healed him to a different level. And I want to show you what this means in the Greek. In the Greek, the first thing the man saw was the human race, both male and female, those created in the image of the gods, with individual personhood staggering around in circles, wooden. This is a picture of Elohim, man and woman, encased in the mud bodies that the Lord created. The man saw into the true spiritual realm and perceived the plight of the Elohuman hybrid. Christ healed that man to see the spiritual before he healed him to see the physical. This man realized a profound truth that it takes some people many, many, many years to be able to find. And that is this truth about the mud hut bodies. And here's the truth about the mud hut bodies. Anyway, I don't want to belabor this, but it's in the book Genesis, Serpents and Doves. Here, the Lord formed a body out of the dust of the ground, Genesis 2:7. Man had already been created 6 verses earlier in Genesis 1:26. They were already created as hybrid spiritual beings. What the Lord created was not the original creation. He created his own fake body out of the ground. It's like the Gospel of Philip says, the Lord created fake bodies out of the dust of the ground, out of dirt and mud. And what he did was trick the original humans to come into that body and breathe the breath of life into it, a soul to come into that body, and it did live. It wasn't until beings, Adam and Eve came into the Lord's created bodies that breath came into them and they lived. The New York Times talks about how mud or clay can be animated. Then they were open. They realized that they were unclothed and barren. They realized they were stuck in this mud hut body. Wow. So Blavatsky is right on a few different levels. She's right that there were men before Adam and Eve. She's right that since the events of that scenario with the serpent and Adam and Eve, that we have come into a much denser experience because we are not half ethereal anymore. We've given up our ethereal nature and we're stuck in these bodies, and we're just now learning how to get out of them. And I can teach you to do that if you have the time and the dedication and want to give a donation. So that's the point that Blavatsky's making here in these first couple pages. And as the cycle proceeds, man's eyes were more and more opened, knowing good and evil. as the Elohim themselves. Having reached its summit, the cycle began to go downward, and it brought with it the fixed line of our terrestrial plane. The man was furnished by nature with coats of skin, whether he was or not. The Lord, rant bastard, started the sacrificial system. So Blavatsky's right that there was a pre-existence of a far more spiritual race. And it can be traced back to the earliest traditions of nearly every people. There's no doubt about it. It goes back to the earliest of days. Philo Judea says, from the sons of El, or from the Elohim, we were descended, and sons of Elohim we must become again. I believe that's completely true. And then the anonymous Gnostic, she says, who wrote the Gospel of John, as many as received him, he gave them power to become the sons of God. Spark of divinity within. We were called gods by the Christ. Now, whether we really had wings or not, I don't know. I tend to believe more that it was representative of the fact that we could ascend into the heavenlies and could move from place to place as the Christ did while he was on earth, but he didn't have any wings. And check this out, folks, right here. Tell me that the Genesis isn't written by leaning on other people. The Kalmucks and some tribes of Siberia describe from their legends earlier creations than our present race. These beings, they say, were possessed of almost boundless knowledge, and in their audacity even threatened rebellion against the great chief spirit. To punish their presumption and humble them, he imprisoned them in bodies, and so shut in their senses. From this, they can escape only through long, repentant self-purification and development. Their shamans, they think, occasionally enjoy the divine powers originally possessed by all human beings. That's Genesis right there. The pre-Adamite man and even the man of Genesis 1:26 were of almost boundless knowledge. They were able to go up and down, and we did threaten the Lord. I don't think the other Elohim were threatened. That's what they wanted. But the Lord is jealous. The Lord is a rat bastard, and he was afraid that we were going to become as powerful as him, which was the plan all along. So to prevent that from happening, he conned us into these bodies, which shut up our senses. And the only way we can escape, forget repentance, we don't have any sin, but through long self-purification, through long development. Now, I can teach you to be 3 feet behind your head, but I need probably 3 months to do it, or a couple months maybe. And the shaman, but guess what? You can be your own shaman. How? You can learn to do it, and you can enjoy the divine powers originally possessed by all human beings. ISIS Unveiled. Pretty interesting stuff, wouldn't you say? There's so much available to us that we have no idea about. And I'm hoping by bringing out these beliefs and these teachings that you may never make yourself avail yourself of without a little bit of a push or a prod. I'm trying to hopefully provoke you to go deeper and to go higher and to realize who you are. So with that, on to the chat room we go to take a look at the Q&A and see if there's any good stuff in here. Hello, Bell Star. Hello, Cuban Pixie. Terry says the etheric nature was part of being in Eden. I think the etheric nature was part of the being in Eden. Ha ha, Terry. Hi, Cuban. Genesis 1:27, God's created us male and female. No, Terry, I think I'm not going to tell you what to believe, but the language does not say they were hermaphroditic. It means some were created female, some were created male, and that we are created with both human and male essence within us, both the spirits of the god and the goddesses. Doesn't mean they were created hermaphroditic with both genitalia. That's, in my humble opinion, rather silly. In my experience, we're all one consciousness that split itself into billions of different points of view. We weren't created by a tyrannical God with anger management issues. Boy, give Unplug the Matrix a big gold star on their paper. We were not created by a tyrannical God with anger management issues. And you could say that we all are part of the Elohim. We all are part of a unity consciousness. I wouldn't argue that. The two gods that take the rib out and separate us into male and female. Do you really think that God took a rib out? Come on, man. I've had out-of-body experiences. I've been two places at once, collided with my other self, became one again. I have not seen that. That's pretty interesting. Birdmen, lizardmen, humans, an evil overlord. Yeah. Physical world is too limited. In the afterlife, you have a power of a God. Why wait till afterlife? Unplug. If you can have it right now. And here we go with the Queen of England. The old Queen of England was one big reptilian. No, I've not seen the size of her coffin. I'm going to check that out. The size of the coffin of, I guess you're talking about Elizabeth's mom, the current Queen Elizabeth's mom. Flash Gordon is way deeper than I ever thought. I've heard that. I never saw Flash Gordon. I think Rex Bear loves Flash Gordon. I've never seen it. It was too campy for me. The mud bodies were golems for slaves. Look in the mirror. You're the slave. There's no doubt that he conned us into mud bodies that we're still living in. This physical body is a prison. I agree 100%. Just got here. I had to walk the dogs. What did I miss? Loving these live hangouts. Sir Jeff is on the ball. Well, I'm glad to be called Sir Jeff. I usually get called other stuff. He got you to look. Bam. Ribeye, laugh out loud. Cool. So, interesting points in the chat room. The Queen Mom, big coffee. Ha, ha, ha. I like it. Anybody else have any questions before we duck out? I got some things I got to do before 10 o'clock in the ask or challenge the Christian whistleblower. That should be fun. I hope it doesn't get out of control, but it should be rather fun. That was some good study. So that was ISIS Unveiled number 2 or 3. ISIS Unveiled number 3, In Search of Parabiblical Wisdom, with question and answer. Thank you for your input. Even if I don't agree with you all the time, like Terry, that's okay. I appreciate Terry being here. And I 100% support Terry's right to be wrong. And you know what? There's room for plurality and multiplicity of beliefs. And I support that 100%. What's your question, Chris? And don't ask me about you know what. What's your question? Fire away. This will be the end. Chris, what is your question? Chris Monet, lay it on me. Going once. Oh, you got your question ready for tonight. Gotcha. Okay. Somehow I feel that it's not going to be a question. It's going to be a challenge. But that's all right, because I'm up. Like they used to say, if you feel you've been mistreated, jump to my chest and be defeated. We just have to know that tonight, if you do come with a challenge, that you have to be willing to give and take, because it will be a give and take, but it will be in it'll be in good nature, and it won't be arguing or argumentative or nasty. So there you go. Until 10 o'clock, which is 3 hours from now on the East Coast and 7 on the West Coast, where we come to you with the new, and I think it may be a regular feature, Ask or Challenge the Christian Whistleblower. Until then, I am the Christian Whistleblower, Jeffrey Daugherty, thanking you for being here, thanking you for taking part, and I hope to see you at 10 o'clock. If you got a question, I'll be glad to answer it. If you have a challenge, ooh, you better think it over. You better come strong. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. We'll see you then.